Marcus Chen had been out of the intelligence game for 3 years when the signal came through on his old radio frequency. He was fixing his motorcycle in the garage of his small house outside Denver when the familiar pattern of clicks and static filled the air. His hands froze on the wrench as the sound transported him back to missions in Eastern Europe, midnight drops in hostile territory, and the brotherhood of soldiers who trusted each other with their lives. The signal was unmistakable, a specific sequence known only to members of Task Force Omega, an elite Black Ops unit that officially never existed. Marcus had served with them for 8 years before a mission in Syria went sideways and left him with a permanent limp and enough psychological scars to fill a psychiatric textbook. The government had given him a new identity, a modest pension, and a firm instruction to disappear into civilian life. But Black Ops signals don't just randomly appear on abandoned frequencies. Someone was either in serious trouble, or this was a trap designed to smoke out former operatives. Marcus limped to his workbench and pulled out a dusty radio scanner he had promised himself he would never use again. His fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted the frequency, his mind racing through possibilities. The signal repeated every 10 minutes for the next hour. Each repetition made Marcus more nervous. According to protocol, only active Black Ops units could send that particular sequence. But Marcus knew that Task Force Omega had been disbanded after the Syrian incident. The official story was that the unit had completed its mission parameters and been reassigned to other divisions. The truth was that too many good soldiers had died, and too many political figures had gotten nervous about a group that operated completely outside normal military oversight. As evening fell, Marcus found himself pacing his small living room, unable to concentrate on anything except the implications of that signal. He had built a quiet life in Colorado. He worked part-time at a local auto repair shop, had a few friends who knew him only as a former Army mechanic, and had even started dating Sarah, a school teacher who made him laugh and didn't ask too many questions about his past. The radio crackled again with the same pattern. This time, Marcus grabbed a pencil and paper and transcribed the signal into the alphanumeric code he had memorized years ago. The message was simple but chilling. Phoenix requires immediate extraction. Coordinates follow. Phoenix had been the code name for Elena Vasquez, the best intelligence analyst Task Force Omega had ever had. She could crack enemy communications, predict insurgent movements, and had saved their lives more times than Marcus could count. According to his last briefing, Elena had been killed in the same Syrian operation that had ended his career. Her death had been one of the reasons he had been so eager to accept retirement and disappear. The idea that she might be alive, and in trouble, sent a chill down his spine. But it also awakened something he thought he had buried, the loyalty and sense of duty that had defined his adult life. Marcus knew he should ignore the signal. His official instructions were clear about maintaining his civilian cover and avoiding any contact with his former life. But Elena had once pulled him out of a building 30 seconds before it exploded. She had shared her rations with him during a week-long surveillance mission in freezing temperatures. She had been more than a teammate. She had been family. The coordinates in the message pointed to a location in Montana, approximately 6 hours of hard driving through mountain roads. Marcus looked around his comfortable home, at the normal life he had worked so hard to build. Sarah's coffee mug still sat on his kitchen counter from the morning she had left for work. Pictures of their weekend hiking trips decorated his refrigerator. Everything he had gained in civilian life seemed precious and fragile in the face of this signal from his past. But the signal kept repeating, and with each repetition, Marcus felt his resolve weakening. Elena would not have sent this message unless she was in desperate trouble. The fact that she was using old Black Ops protocols suggested she was being hunted by people who would recognize and intercept normal communication channels. If she was alive and hiding, she had been living in the shadows for 3 years, probably believing that everyone she had trusted was dead or had abandoned her. Marcus finally turned off the radio scanner and sat in the darkness of his living room, wrestling with a decision that would determine the rest of his life. He could ignore the signal, maintain his cover, and hope that Elena would find another way to survive whatever threat she was facing, or he could acknowledge that some bonds cannot be broken by time, distance, or official orders. The smart choice was obvious. The safe choice was clear. But as Marcus remembered Elena's laugh, her fierce determination, and the countless times she had risked everything for the team, he realized that he had never been very good at making smart, safe choices. That was probably why he had ended up in Black Ops in the first place. By midnight, Marcus had made his decision. He pulled a duffel bag from his closet and began packing items he had hoped never to use again. False identification documents, untraceable weapons, and equipment that would allow him to move across the country without leaving an electronic trail. His old life was calling, and despite every rational argument against it, Marcus Chen was going to answer. The Montana coordinates led Marcus to an abandoned mining town called Silver Creek, where weathered buildings stood like tombstones against the stark mountain landscape. He had driven through the night, stopping only for gas and to switch license plates at a truck stop outside Billings. His military training had kicked in automatically. Vary your route, check for surveillance, trust no one. The designated meeting point was an old mining office at the edge of town. Marcus arrived 2 hours early and established overwatch positions on the surrounding hills. Through his binoculars, he watched the building for any signs of activity, his trained eyes scanning for the telltale glints of sniper scopes or the unnatural movement patterns that indicated an ambush. At exactly noon, a figure emerged from the shadows of the building. Even at a distance, Marcus recognized Elena's distinctive walk, purposeful but fluid like a dancer who had learned to move through war zones. She was thinner than he remembered, her dark hair now streaked with premature gray, but she moved with the same deadly grace that had made her legendary among their unit. Marcus maintained his position for another 30 minutes, watching Elena check the building's perimeter with professional thoroughness. Only when he was satisfied that she was alone did he begin his approach. As he got closer, he could see the changes that 3 years of hiding had carved into her face. New scars marked her left cheek, and her eyes held a wariness that went beyond normal operational caution. Elena spotted him when he was still 50 yards away. Her hand moved instinctively toward her concealed weapon before recognition flickered across her features. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the desolate landscape. Two ghosts from a war that officially never happened. "Marcus," she said when he finally reached the building. Her voice was hoarser than he remembered, but it still carried the authority that had made green recruits trust her tactical assessments over those of officers twice her age. "We buried you in Syria," Marcus replied, searching her face for explanations that would make sense of the impossible. Elena's laugh was bitter and tired. The Marcus Chen I knew would have checked the body before accepting any official report. She gestured toward the interior of the mining office. "We need to talk, but not out here. I've been monitoring satellite patterns, and we have maybe 20 minutes before the next surveillance pass." Inside the building, Elena spread a detailed map across a dust-covered table. Red pins marked locations across 3 states, connected by what appeared to be a complex pattern of movement and timing. She had been busy during her 3 years of supposed death, and Marcus could see that whatever operation she was running, it was far from over. "The Syrian mission was compromised from the beginning," Elena began, her finger tracing routes on the map. "Someone inside our command structure had been feeding information to hostile forces for months. The explosion that supposedly killed me was meant to eliminate the entire team, including you." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "Who?" "Colonel Harrison, our beloved commanding officer." Elena's voice carried a venom that Marcus had never heard before. He had been selling Black Ops intelligence to the highest bidder for over 2 years. Syrian insurgents, Russian military contractors, Chinese intelligence services, anyone willing to pay premium prices for information about American special operations. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Colonel Harrison had been more than their commanding officer. He had been a mentor and father figure to many of the unit's members. He had personally recruited Marcus, had attended the weddings of team members, had delivered eulogies at military funerals with tears in his eyes. "The explosion was meant to look like an enemy attack," Elena continued. "Harrison needed to eliminate everyone who might have started connecting the dots about his operation. But I had been investigating irregularities in our mission parameters for weeks before Syria. When I realized what was happening, I had maybe 30 seconds to decide between escaping or trying to warn the team. Marcus remembered the chaos of that final mission, the unexpected enemy resistance, the communications failures, the feeling that they were walking into a trap that closed tighter with every step. You chose to disappear and let us think you were dead. I chose to stay alive long, enough to gather evidence and find out how deep the corruption went. Elena pulled a thick folder from her backpack and placed it on the table. Harrison wasn't working alone. He had connections throughout the intelligence community, people who could manipulate mission reports, alter personnel records, and make inconvenient soldiers disappear. The folder contained photographs, financial records, and communication intercepts that painted a picture of betrayal so comprehensive that Marcus struggled to process it. Bank accounts in offshore locations, meetings with known enemy agents, orders that had sent good soldiers into situations designed to get them killed. "Why contact me now?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "Because Harrison discovered that I survived Syria, and he's been hunting me ever since." Elena's finger pointed to several recent pins on her map. "He's been using active Black Ops resources to track me down, which means he still has influence and access within the military intelligence structure. I can't stay hidden forever, and I can't bring him down alone." Marcus studied the evidence spread before him, feeling the weight of a conspiracy that reached far beyond one corrupt officer. "What do you need from me?" Elena met his eyes with the same steady gaze that had once convinced him to trust her tactical assessments in the middle of firefights.
"Harrison has scheduled a meeting with his primary contact, a Russian intelligence officer named Petrov, next week in Seattle.
It's my only chance to get close enough to gather the final evidence I need to expose the entire network." "That sounds like a suicide mission disguised as an intelligence operation." "Probably," Elena admitted, "but it's the only way to make sure that the soldiers who died because of Harrison's betrayal get justice, and it's the only way to ensure that he can't sell out any more operations." Marcus looked around the abandoned mining office, thinking about his quiet life in Denver and wondering if he would ever see it again. Sarah would be expecting him to call that evening. His boss at the auto shop would wonder why he hadn't shown up for work. The normal world he had built seemed very far away from this desolate place where his past had come calling. But Elena was right about justice for their fallen teammates. Marcus had attended too many military funerals, had comforted too many widows, had watched too many children grow up without fathers. The idea that those deaths had been preventable, that they had resulted from betrayal rather than the honest dangers of military service, ignited a fury that 3 years of civilian life had not diminished. "What's the plan?" he asked, and saw relief flicker across Elena's features. "We have 6 days to prepare," she replied, spreading additional maps across the table. "Harrison will be expecting me to be alone, desperate, and running scared. Instead, he's going to find out that some things are worth coming back from the dead to finish." The safe house Elena had prepared outside Seattle looked like a typical suburban rental property, complete with a well-maintained lawn and neighbors who waved politely but minded their own business. Inside, however, she had transformed the basement into a sophisticated intelligence center that would have impressed their old Black Ops technical team. Multiple computer monitors displayed real-time surveillance feeds from around the city. Encrypted communication channels buzzed with intercepted military and intelligence traffic, and detailed reconnaissance photos covered every available wall surface. Elena had been busy during her 3 years of hiding, and her operation was far more extensive than Marcus had initially realized. "Harrison has been using Hotel Monaco downtown as his primary meeting location," Elena explained, pointing to a 3-dimensional building layout displayed on her central monitor. "Petrov always books the penthouse suite under a diplomatic cover identity. They meet every 3 months to exchange intelligence packages and coordinate payment transfers." Marcus studied the building schematics, his tactical mind automatically identifying security vulnerabilities and potential escape routes. Hotel Monaco has military-grade security systems and professional protection teams. Getting close enough to record their conversation will require more than just good intentions and old equipment, which is why we're not going to rely on traditional surveillance methods. Elena pulled up a new set of files on her computer. Petrov has a weakness for expensive electronics, particularly devices that demonstrate cutting-edge technology. Harrison always brings him gifts during their meetings, usually items that appear to be commercial products but actually contain hidden military applications. She showed Marcus photographs of previous gifts: a smartwatch that could decrypt enemy communications, a tablet computer that contained advanced satellite mapping software, and a wireless speaker system that could intercept and record conversations from remarkable distances. This time, Harrison is planning to give Petrov a prototype smartphone that contains classified facial recognition software. Elena continued. But what Harrison doesn't know is that I've been monitoring his supply chain for months. The phone he thinks he's giving to Petrov will actually be one that I've modified with my own surveillance package. Marcus was impressed despite himself. Elena had always been brilliant with technology, but this level of sophisticated intelligence manipulation was beyond anything she had demonstrated during their Black Ops missions. How did you manage to intercept and modify his gift without Harrison detecting the substitution? Elena's smile was grim but satisfied. Let's just say that Harrison's technology suppliers are not as secure as they believe themselves to be. I've been very patient, very careful, and very motivated over the past 3 years. When you're presumed dead, you have certain advantages in terms of moving through security systems that don't expect ghosts. The plan Elena outlined was elegant in its simplicity, but terrifying in its complexity. She would use the modified smartphone to record Harrison's meeting with Petrov, gathering evidence of their intelligence trading operation. Simultaneously, Marcus would position himself to provide security and extraction support if the operation was discovered or compromised. But as Elena explained the details, Marcus realized that success would require split-second timing, flawless execution, and a significant amount of luck. One miscalculation, one unexpected security measure, one moment of recognition, and they would both disappear into the same black holes that had swallowed other inconvenient soldiers. There's something else, Elena said, her tone becoming even more serious. Harrison isn't just selling intelligence to foreign governments. He's been using his access to eliminate American agents who get too close to discovering his operation. At least 6 operatives have died under suspicious circumstances over the past 2 years, including 2 who were investigating financial irregularities in Black Ops funding. She showed Marcus classified death reports and mission summaries that painted a picture of systematic murder disguised as operational casualties. Agents had died in training accidents, vehicle malfunctions, and enemy encounters that seemed unusually well coordinated. The pattern was subtle enough to avoid triggering official investigations, but clear enough to serve as a warning to anyone who might consider exposing Harrison's activities. He's building a network of corruption that extends throughout the intelligence community, Elena explained. Russian money, Chinese connections, Middle Eastern arms dealers. Harrison has been selling American secrets to anyone willing to pay premium prices. But more than that, he's been eliminating American personnel who pose threats to his operation. Marcus felt sick as he reviewed the evidence. These weren't just faceless statistics. Some of the dead agents had been people he knew, colleagues, who had served with distinction and died believing they were protecting their country. The scope of Harrison's betrayal was beyond anything Marcus had imagined possible. Why hasn't anyone else discovered this pattern, he asked. Because Harrison has been very careful to spread the deaths across different agencies and geographic locations, Elena replied. Each individual incident looks like normal operational risk. It's only when you combine all the data and analyze the connections that the systematic nature becomes apparent. She pulled up a comprehensive timeline that showed how Harrison had carefully orchestrated a campaign of murder and misdirection over several years. He had used his position to access personnel files, mission schedules, and operational plans, allowing him to predict when agents might become suspicious and arrange for their elimination before they could report their concerns. The meeting with Petrov next week isn't just about intelligence trading, Elena continued. Harrison is planning to provide a complete list of American agents currently operating in Eastern Europe. Petrov will distribute that information to hostile intelligence services, which will result in the capture or death of dozens of American personnel. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. They weren't just trying to expose past corruption. They were racing against time to prevent a massacre of active American agents. The lives of dozens of soldiers and intelligence operatives hung in the balance, and Elena's risky plan might be the only way to save them. The smartphone modification will record their conversation, but we need more than just audio evidence, Elena explained. We need to document the actual exchange of materials, the financial transactions, and the specific intelligence packages being transferred. That means getting close enough to photograph documents and record video evidence. Marcus studied the hotel layout again, this time with the understanding that failure would result in not just their own deaths, but the deaths of innocent American agents who had no idea they were being sold to enemy governments. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming, but it was also familiar. This was the kind of impossible mission that Black Ops teams had been trained to handle. "What's our timeline?" he asked. "Petrov arrives in Seattle tomorrow evening," Elena replied. "Harrison will meet with him Thursday night at exactly 11 p.m. We have less than 48 hours to finalize our preparations and position ourselves for the operation." Marcus looked around the sophisticated intelligence center Elena had built, thinking about the 3 years of patient planning and careful preparation that had led to this moment. She had sacrificed everything, her identity, her safety, her chance at a normal life, to gather the evidence needed to expose Harrison's network of corruption and prevent further betrayals. "What happens after we get the evidence?" Marcus asked. Elena's expression became grim. "Then we find out how many people in the intelligence community can still be trusted with information that could destroy careers and end lives. And we hope that there are enough honest soldiers left to ensure that justice actually gets served." The Hotel Monaco's penthouse suite was exactly as Elena had described. Luxury accommodations designed to impress foreign dignitaries and provide privacy for sensitive conversations. From his position on the roof of the adjacent building, Marcus had a clear view through the suite's floor-to-ceiling windows as Harrison arrived precisely at 11 p.m., carrying a small gift box that contained the modified smartphone. Elena's voice crackled through his earpiece with barely controlled tension. "Petrov entered the building through the service entrance 12 minutes ago. Hotel security believes he's a kitchen consultant reviewing their catering operations. Both subjects are now in the target location." Marcus adjusted his high-powered camera and began documenting the meeting through the telephoto lens. Harrison looked exactly as Marcus remembered. Tall, distinguished, with silver hair and the confident bearing of a career military officer. It was almost impossible to reconcile this familiar figure with the evidence of betrayal and murder that Elena had compiled. Petrov was younger than Marcus had expected, maybe 40 years old. With the lean build and watchful eyes of a professional intelligence operative, he moved through the luxury suite with the casual confidence of someone who had conducted similar meetings in dozens of expensive hotels around the world. They're beginning the exchange, Elena reported from her concealed position in the hotel's communications center. She had managed to gain access to the building's internal systems using credentials stolen from a legitimate technology contractor. Harrison is presenting the smartphone gift. Petrov is examining it with obvious interest. Through his camera, Marcus watched Harrison demonstrate various features of the device while Petrov asked questions and took notes. The Russian operative seemed particularly interested in the facial recognition capabilities, just as Elena had predicted. Neither man had any idea that their conversation was being recorded by the very device they were discussing. "Financial transfer is beginning," Elena whispered. Petrov is accessing what appears to be an encrypted banking application on his own device. "I'm seeing data transfers that match the pattern of previous payments to Harrison's offshore accounts." Marcus continued photographing the meeting while monitoring radio frequencies for any indication that they had been discovered. Hotel security maintained routine patrols throughout the building, but nothing suggested unusual activity or heightened alertness. Elena's planning had been meticulous, and so far everything was proceeding according to their operational timeline. "Document exchange starting now," Elena reported. "Harrison is providing what appears to be a comprehensive intelligence package. Multiple folders, photographs, and what looks like computer storage devices." Through his telephoto lens, Marcus could see Harrison laying out materials across the suite's conference table. Even at a distance, the scope of the intelligence being transferred was obvious. Maps, personnel files, operational summaries, and technical specifications covered every available surface. This wasn't just routine information trading. This was a massive intelligence breach that would compromise American operations across multiple theaters. "Elena, are you getting clear recordings of the specific documents?" Marcus asked. "Affirmative. The smartphone is providing excellent video and audio quality. We're documenting everything. The documents themselves, the conversation, and the financial transactions." Elena's voice carried a mix of satisfaction and barely controlled anger. Harrison is specifically discussing the Eastern European agent list. He's providing names, locations, operational responsibilities, and security protocols. Marcus felt his jaw clench as he watched Harrison casually discussing information that would result in the capture or death of American agents. These weren't abstract intelligence assets. They were real people with families, colleagues, and futures that Harrison was destroying for money. Petrov is asking about timeline and distribution, Elena continued. Harrison is recommending immediate dissemination to Syrian, Iranian, and North Korean intelligence services. He's suggesting coordinated operations to maximize the effectiveness of the intelligence. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Harrison providing detailed briefings on American intelligence capabilities, operational procedures, and personnel vulnerabilities. Marcus documented everything through his camera while Elena recorded the audio and video evidence that would eventually bring down Harrison's entire network. They're concluding the meeting, Elena reported. Final payment confirmation is being processed. Petrov is securing all materials in a diplomatic pouch that will be immune from customs inspection. Marcus watched Harrison and Petrov shake hands with the casual professionalism of business partners, completing a routine transaction. The Russian operative gathered his materials and prepared to leave, while Harrison remained in the suite to make additional phone calls that Elena was monitoring through the hotel's communication systems. Marcus, we have a problem. Elena's voice suddenly carried urgent concern. Harrison is making calls to unknown numbers, and his conversation suggests he's aware that someone has been investigating his activities. He's not mentioning any specific names, but he's discussing security measures and elimination protocols. Through his camera, Marcus could see Harrison pacing the suite while speaking intensely into his phone. The colonel's body language suggested agitation and concern that went beyond normal operational caution. Something had triggered his suspicions, and that meant their own safety was potentially compromised. Elena, we need to extract immediately, Marcus said, already beginning to pack his surveillance equipment. If Harrison suspects investigation, he'll implement security measures that could expose our entire operation. Agreed. I'm downloading final data files and preparing to evacuate my position. Meet at Extraction Point Alpha in 30 minutes. Marcus made his way down from the roof, using the emergency access routes Elena had identified during their reconnaissance. The building's corridors were empty except for routine security patrols, but he maintained full operational alertness as he moved toward the service exit. Elena emerged from the hotel's communication center 12 minutes later, carrying a laptop bag that contained the evidence they had gathered. She moved with the controlled urgency of someone who knew that discovery would mean immediate and violent death. Did we get everything we need? Marcus asked as they reached their predetermined extraction vehicle. More than enough to destroy Harrison's entire operation, Elena replied. Complete financial records, detailed conversation transcripts, video evidence of document transfers, and comprehensive lists of compromised intelligence assets. We have everything necessary to expose the full scope of his betrayal. As they drove away from the hotel, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. They had successfully gathered the evidence needed to bring Harrison to justice and prevent the massacre of American agents. But he also knew that the most dangerous part of their operation was just beginning. What's our next move? He asked. Elena's expression was grim but determined. Now we find out who in the intelligence community can still be trusted with evidence that will destroy careers and end lives. And we hope that there are enough honest soldiers left to ensure that justice actually gets served. Marcus nodded, understanding that they were about to enter the most treacherous phase of their mission. Gathering evidence had been dangerous, but presenting it to officials who might themselves be compromised would require a different kind of courage entirely. Harrison will know within hours that someone recorded his meeting, Elena continued. He'll implement immediate security protocols and probably attempt to eliminate anyone who might pose a threat to his operation. We're now officially running for our lives. As they disappeared into the Seattle night, Marcus realized that their success in gathering evidence had only raised the stakes. Harrison would be desperate to protect his network, which meant that Elena and Marcus had become the most wanted targets in a very deadly game. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Tacoma became their fortress as Harrison's hunters closed in from all directions. Elena had chosen the location carefully. Multiple escape routes, clear sight lines in all directions, and enough distance from civilian populations to avoid collateral damage if their pursuers decided to use heavy weapons. Marcus positioned motion sensors around the perimeter while Elena worked frantically to upload their evidence to multiple secure servers around the world. They had less than 6 hours before Harrison's cleanup team would likely track them to this location, and Elena was determined to ensure that their evidence would survive even if they didn't. I'm sending copies to journalists, congressional oversight committees, military investigators, and foreign intelligence services that have been victims of Harrison's information sales. Elena explained as her fingers flew across multiple keyboards. Even if Harrison manages to suppress some of the releases, he can't control them all. Through his surveillance equipment, Marcus watched vehicles approaching their position from 3 different directions. Professional drivers, coordinated timing, communications discipline. This was definitely a military operation rather than local law enforcement. Harrison had deployed active Black Ops resources to hunt them down. "Elena, we've got company," Marcus reported. "Multiple vehicles, tactical formation, probably 8 to 12 operatives with military training and serious firepower." Elena didn't look up from her computers. "I need another 10 minutes to finish the uploads. Can you buy me that much time?" Marcus checked his weapons and defensive positions. 10 minutes against professional soldiers was a lifetime in combat situations, but Elena's evidence was their only hope of exposing Harrison's network before more American agents died. "I'll give you whatever time you need." The first assault came exactly as Marcus had predicted. Coordinated approach from multiple directions, suppressing fire to pin them down, followed by tactical team advancement toward the warehouse. Marcus responded with precision shooting that forced the attackers to take cover, but he knew he was vastly outnumbered. "Elena, how much longer?" he called between bursts of gunfire. 7 minutes, she replied, her voice steady despite the bullets striking the walls around her computer station. "The financial records are uploading to Swiss banking investigators. If Harrison tries to access his offshore accounts after tonight, he'll find some very interested authorities waiting for him." Marcus moved between defensive positions, using the warehouse's industrial equipment as cover while maintaining suppressing fire on the advancing soldiers. These weren't Harrison's usual corrupt intelligence contacts. These were active-duty Black Ops operatives who probably believed they were hunting dangerous terrorists rather than fellow soldiers trying to expose corruption. Flashbang grenade exploded near Marcus's position, temporarily disorienting him and allowing the assault team to advance closer to the warehouse interior. Through his ringing ears, he could hear Elena's keyboard still clicking frantically as she raced to complete the evidence uploads. "Marcus, the personnel files are going to military criminal investigators," Elena reported. "Harrison won't be able to eliminate any more agents once this information reaches the right people." Another coordinated assault pushed Marcus back toward Elena's computer station. He was running low on ammunition, and the attackers were displaying professional skill that matched his own. In a straight firefight, they would eventually overwhelm his defenses through superior numbers and resources. 4 minutes, Elena announced. "The conversation recordings are uploading to congressional intelligence committees." Harrison's voice is clearly identifiable, discussing the sale of classified information and the planned elimination of American agents. Marcus triggered the explosive charges he had placed around the warehouse perimeter, hoping to disorient the attackers and buy additional time. The blasts temporarily halted their advance, but also attracted the attention of local emergency services. Soon they would have both Harrison's hunters and civilian authorities converging on their position. "Elena, we need an extraction plan," Marcus called. "Even if you finish the uploads, we won't survive long enough to see Harrison brought to justice." "Already arranged," Elena replied with grim satisfaction. "I've been in contact with Senator Morrison's intelligence oversight staff. They're sending a protection detail that should arrive within the next few minutes." Marcus hoped that Elena's political contacts would prove more reliable than the military chain of command that Harrison had corrupted. But he also knew that Harrison's operatives would be under orders to eliminate all witnesses, regardless of political protection or congressional oversight. 2 minutes, Elena announced. "The video evidence is uploading to international criminal courts. Harrison's meeting with Petrov is being documented by authorities in 6 different countries." The sound of additional vehicles approaching made Marcus's heart sink until he realized that these new arrivals were positioning themselves between the warehouse and Harrison's assault team. Through his surveillance equipment, he could see professional security personnel establishing defensive positions and directing the Black Ops operatives to withdraw. "Elena, I think your congressional friends just arrived," Marcus reported. "Upload complete," Elena announced, finally stepping away from her computers. "Harrison's entire network is now exposed to authorities around the world. Bank accounts frozen, personnel files secured, conversation recordings distributed, and video evidence documented by international investigators." The firefight gradually subsided as Harrison's operatives realized they were now facing a larger force with legitimate governmental authority. Through his radio equipment, Marcus could hear conversations between the assault team leader and what was obviously a higher command structure that had just learned about congressional involvement in the situation. Senator Morrison herself appeared at the warehouse entrance 20 minutes later, accompanied by military criminal investigators and federal prosecutors who immediately began securing Elena's evidence and taking statements about Harrison's activities. She was a small woman with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone who had spent decades fighting political battles in Washington. "Ms. Vasquez, Mr. Chen," she said, "your evidence has already triggered arrests in 4 countries and frozen approximately $40 million in illegal intelligence payments. Colonel Harrison is currently being detained by military police pending formal charges of treason, murder, and conspiracy." Elena slumped against her computer station, exhaustion finally overwhelming the adrenaline that had sustained her through 3 years of hiding and weeks of dangerous investigation. "What about the Eastern European agent list? Has Petrov distributed that information to hostile intelligence services?" "Petrov was arrested by FBI counterintelligence agents approximately 1 hour ago," Senator Morrison replied. "The diplomatic pouch containing Harrison's intelligence package was intercepted before leaving American territory. The agents whose identities were compromised are being extracted or relocated as a precautionary measure." Marcus felt a relief so profound that he had to sit down. They had not only exposed Harrison's corruption, but prevented the massacre of innocent American agents. The evidence Elena had gathered would ensure that Harrison and his network faced justice, while the intelligence they had recovered would protect soldiers and operatives around the world. "There will be extensive debriefings, congressional testimony, and criminal proceedings," Senator Morrison continued. "Both of you will need protective custody until all of Harrison's associates have been identified and arrested." This network extended far beyond one corrupt colonel. Elena looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed exhaustion, relief, and something that might have been hope. They had survived 3 years of hiding, weeks of dangerous investigation, and a final assault by professional soldiers. But more importantly, they had prevented Harrison from destroying more lives and ensured that their fallen teammates would finally receive justice. "What happens to us now?" Marcus asked. Senator Morrison's smile was both sympathetic and determined. "Now you get to discover what it's like to be heroes instead of ghosts." 6 months after Harrison's arrest, Marcus stood in the Denver courthouse where the former colonel faced sentencing for treason, murder, and conspiracy charges that would ensure he spent the rest of his life in federal prison. Elena sat beside him in the public gallery, no longer hiding in the shadows but testifying openly about the corruption that had cost so many soldiers their lives. The trial had revealed the full scope of Harrison's network, corrupt officials in 7 different agencies, intelligence sales to hostile governments spanning 4 years, and the systematic murder of 16 American agents who had discovered pieces of his operation. Elena's evidence had been so comprehensive that Harrison's defense attorneys had eventually advised him to accept a plea agreement rather than face the death penalty. The defendant's actions represent the most serious breach of military honor and national security in recent history, Judge Martinez declared from the bench. Colonel Harrison violated every oath he swore, betrayed every soldier under his command, and caused the deaths of American personnel who trusted him with their lives. Marcus watched Harrison's face as the judge delivered the sentence: life imprisonment without possibility of parole, forfeiture of all military benefits and honors, and financial restitution to the families of agents killed because of his betrayal. The man who had once been their respected commanding officer showed no emotion as his career and life were officially destroyed. Elena testified for 3 days during the trial, presenting evidence with the same calm professionalism she had once brought to intelligence briefings. But Marcus could see the toll that 3 years of hiding and fear had taken on her. She had gained weight back, and the gray in her hair was slowly returning to its natural black, but her eyes still held a wariness that might never completely disappear. After the sentencing, they walked together through downtown Denver toward the coffee shop where Sarah worked. Marcus had spent months explaining his absence to the woman he loved, carefully revealing pieces of his past while Elena's case worked its way through the legal system. Sarah had been patient, understanding, and remarkably accepting of the dangerous world that had reclaimed her boyfriend for half a year. "Any regrets?" Elena asked as they walked through the crisp autumn air. "About exposing Harrison?" "Never." Marcus considered the question seriously. "About the 3 years you spent hiding? About the people who died before we could stop him? Those I'll regret for the rest of my life." Elena nodded, understanding the complex emotions that came with delayed justice. "Senator Morrison offered me a position with congressional intelligence oversight. Apparently, my experience with corruption investigation has impressed some important people in Washington." "Are you going to take it?" "I think so," Elena replied. "Someone needs to watch for the next Harrison before he can do this much damage. And I seem to have developed a talent for finding corruption in unexpected places." They reached the coffee shop where Sarah was working the afternoon shift. Through the window, Marcus could see her laughing with customers, completely at ease in the normal world that Elena had never really known and that Marcus had worked so hard to build. It was a world where people worried about mortgage payments and weekend plans rather than enemy surveillance and assassination attempts. "She's beautiful," Elena observed, watching Sarah work, "and she obviously makes you happy in ways that military service never could." Marcus nodded, thinking about the choice he had made to answer Elena's signal rather than maintaining his quiet civilian life. "I almost didn't respond to your radio transmission. I had built something good here, something peaceful. Part of me wanted to stay hidden and hope that someone else would solve Harrison's corruption. But you didn't," Elena replied.
"Because you're the kind of soldier who can't ignore a distress call from a teammate."
"Even when answering it might cost you everything you've built." Sarah spotted them through the window and waved enthusiastically, her face lighting up with the smile that had convinced Marcus to trust civilian happiness. She gestured toward an empty table near the window, indicating that she would join them as soon as she finished with her current customers. "The congressional oversight position comes with full security clearance restoration and a substantial salary," Elena continued. "But more importantly, it comes with the authority to investigate intelligence operations before they turn corrupt rather than after they've already caused damage." Marcus understood what Elena was really saying. She was offering him a chance to return to the world of intelligence and military service, but this time with the authority to prevent corruption, rather than simply following orders that might be compromised. It was an opportunity to make a real difference in protecting American soldiers and agents. "Sarah and I have been talking about marriage," Marcus said, watching his girlfriend efficiently handle the afternoon coffee rush. "She's been amazingly patient about my disappearance and the trial testimony, but she deserves a husband who can commit completely to building a life together." Elena followed his gaze toward Sarah, studying the woman who represented everything that Marcus had gained by leaving military service behind. "She also deserves a husband who feels fulfilled by the life he's chosen. Running away from your sense of duty might protect your relationship, but it won't make you happy in the long run." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching Sarah work and thinking about choices that would determine the rest of their lives. Marcus had proven during Elena's investigation that he could still function as an elite soldier when circumstances demanded it. But he had also discovered during his 3 years in Denver that civilian happiness was possible if he was willing to commit fully to building it. Sarah finally joined them at their table, bringing coffee and the warm energy that had made Marcus fall in love with her teaching philosophy. She kissed him gently before sitting down, treating Elena with the friendly courtesy she showed to all of Marcus's friends. "How did the sentencing go?" Sarah asked, understanding that this final legal resolution represented the end of a very difficult chapter in both Marcus and Elena's lives. "Harrison received life imprisonment," Elena replied. "It won't bring back the agents he killed, but it ensures he can never betray anyone else." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, studying Elena with the perceptive intelligence that made her such an effective teacher. And now you both have to decide what comes next, knowing that this experience has changed you in ways that can't be undone. Marcus was struck by Sarah's insight into the psychological challenges they were facing. She understood that exposure to Harrison's betrayal had awakened something in both him and Elena that couldn't simply be ignored or suppressed. They had been reminded of their capacity for meaningful service and their responsibility to protect other soldiers and agents. Elena has been offered a position investigating intelligence corruption, Marcus explained. It's important work that could prevent future betrayals like Harrison's. Sarah looked between them with the kind of understanding that comes from loving someone deeply enough to recognize their essential nature. And you're wondering whether you should accept a similar position, even though it would mean leaving the peaceful life you've built here. Marcus nodded, appreciating Sarah's ability to understand complex situations without requiring lengthy explanations. I'm torn between the desire to serve and the desire to build something lasting with you. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand, her touch conveying both love and understanding. Marcus, I fell in love with a man who had the courage to risk everything to protect people he cared about. I didn't fall in love with someone who was willing to abandon his sense of duty for the sake of domestic comfort. Elena watched this exchange with obvious interest, recognizing that Sarah was offering Marcus permission to return to service without sacrificing their relationship. It was the kind of generous understanding that made the difference between sustainable love and romantic fantasy. Besides, Sarah continued with a smile that mixed affection and practical wisdom. Intelligence oversight positions are based in Washington, not war zones. You could serve your country and still come home to me every night. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he realized that Sarah was right. He didn't have to choose between service and love if he was smart about the kind of service he chose. Elena's offer represented a chance to make a real difference without sacrificing the relationship that had become the foundation of his happiness. So, Elena said with a grin that reminded Marcus of their old partnership, are you ready to help me make sure that the next Harrison gets stopped before he can hurt anyone? Marcus looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Elena, who represented both his past service and his future opportunity to make a meaningful difference. Let's go catch some corrupt officials.